Hello and welcome to Grody and Unprofessional. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, we wrestle with the proper definitions of both failure and success. Unsurprisingly, we find answers among the wise words of the great American philosopher, Shaquille O'Neal. Danny Kirk, it is so good to have you as a guest on Grody and Unprofessional. I am really excited about this conversation, and I'm glad we finally get to sit down and talk about your background and your experience as an entrepreneur as well as a marketer. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Justin.
So where I want to start, we all come from somewhere. We all have a background. We all were raised in a certain environment, and that impacts who we grow up to be and the types of jobs we take on. You grew up in a different environment than the career you took on. Would you share the story a little bit? I like the story. Go ahead and share it with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am born and raised from a bunch of academics and musicians. Well, a bunch meaning two, I should say. My dad was a musician, a college professor, a trumpet player, and my mom was kind of a musician as well, but she also taught preschool. My sister, who's my only other sibling, is an academic too. She has a PhD. I, on the other hand, dropped out of high school, never finished. Took 8 years on an undergraduate degree in college, but patting myself on the back, I was a very good trumpet player from a very young age. So my dad was a trumpet professor, and he actually didn't want me to play trumpet because he thought that would put too much pressure on me. But being a kid and being a boneheaded kid, I couldn't help but do it. So I decided to do that and had a pretty meteoric rise for a bit. So I was second and third in the nation and eighth in the world, and used solo competitions as a classical trumpet player. A lot of other things took me many places. It was exciting times, but that is not what I do today. I wouldn't know which end of a trumpet to blow into at this point in my career. I am now in startups and entrepreneurship and marketing. So yeah, it was a pretty circuitous route, but there have been many lessons learned from things that I didn't think had any value in music as far as business goes.
Early in your life, as you're starting to think about the types of roles that you want to work in your profession, what did it look like for entrepreneurship, starting companies, to come into the universe of possibility? And then how did you start to test that thesis that this might be something that I'm interested in doing?
Yeah, I was in college finishing up a degree in music, yet again, too many years into it. And I was looking for some more scholarship money, I think, and I applied to the scholarship called the Shirley G. Schmitz Foundation Scholarship. They're up in Phoenix, Arizona. Shirley was one of the only women publishers last mid-century, very successful, created a scholarship fund. And they had a very low barrier to entry and were willing to take schmucks like myself. And I got it, was in that scholarship as a fellow for a couple of years. And that was all just a bunch of entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs like myself. So that was kind of the first taste of it, just talking to some of these people, getting to know them, what they were doing. Then the next thing that really kind of launched me into it was about 15 years ago, me and a buddy named Elliot joined a startup weekend 48-hour hackathon. Just one of those things where you all for a weekend go in and come up with some harebrained ideas and see what lands Sunday night. So those were the kind of two main pivots there as far as how I got into it.
Yeah. Were these situations where you started a company or you were just starting to spend time around people that were entrepreneurs?
Yeah, the first one was mainly kind of starting to be around them. And I had a few ideas. Like, to me, when you actually started a company, it either got to have revenue or had customers, or you tried for at least like a year or so and failed miserably and took your licks and moved on. So that's kind of like the definition to me of if you started or not, versus just going to mixer events and saying you're an entrepreneur.
Sure.
So yeah, when I was a fellow in that foundation, that was more just kind of kicking around some ideas and whatnot. As far as that startup weekend, Elliot and I actually did create an MVP for a SaaS company, a minimal viable product, and we did get customers. And then we ended up growing that company for about 5 years. So that was kind of one of the first ones. And there were a couple other businesses around that time that got to revenue and then spun down, but that was the main first win.
That makes sense. How long has gone by since that first one? And how many businesses have you started in your career?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm about at 15 years now where I would actually put a pin in some of the ideas. And the number of businesses that have had revenue or gone somewhere and maybe failed, I would call it maybe 5 to 7, depending on how you define them. But I like to tell people that every single year I pursue about 200 ideas.
Right.
And it's funny, and I'm sure you may be the same way, but I love the term pearl clutching. When you're a first entrepreneur, you're like, this is my one and only chance at success.
Sure.
This is my baby. And it's an absolute horrible idea. Nobody is willing to tell me that, but I think it's my one and only chance at success. So now, these days, I have become totally fine with undoing, unvalidating ideas and whatnot. So every year I pursue probably 100 to 200 ideas, just talking to professionals that I know, experts in the field, kicking tires for about a week or so, and then usually unvalidating those ideas and not pursuing them.
Yeah. Back to your origin story, it's interesting. You talk about growing up in a household with educators and choosing a path of entrepreneurship and taking risk. It does remind me of the old Robert Kiyosaki book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where he was raised in a household of educators that put high value on security and stability, things that aren't changing, not taking risk. And I think it was his neighbor or his friend's dad was the entrepreneur that nobody really knew what his job was, and he didn't keep normal hours, and talking about comparing and contrasting. Did you have those pressures growing up also? You said your dad didn't want you to play trumpet, but whether the academic system or more of a large blue chip company, was there pressure to stay in the safe and the secure versus go out and try to hunt and kill something on your own?
Yeah, I would say my parents are incredibly supportive, almost annoyingly so, I would say, I think they had a lot of doubts as far as if I would come out the other end with any level of success. But as far as like telling me to go get a job or anything like that, there was never anything. And I also think from my success at Trumpet, they knew that I had caught the bug.
Sure.
It's actually one thing that I get really excited seeing when kids join a sports team early and they get that taste for success, for winning. If you get that taste when you're 10 years old, you're usually going to do pretty well in life, So it kind of felt the same for me. I'm a short, kind of stocky guy, so I was never picked for any sports teams, but I got that taste for success in music. And I think they probably had some level of confidence that I would figure something out.
Yeah. What would you say are the character traits that equip you and enable you to be successful as an entrepreneur, as a serial entrepreneur at this point?
Yeah, curiosity first and foremost. As we speak, we are going into the generative engine optimization and AI search wave. And I already had my marketing agency for about 9 years now. And over the course of the past couple of years or so, we've gotten into Reddit marketing and GEO. And just being a curious person and being willing to try and fail and dive into something, we've doubled our revenue in the past 6 months just because I was willing to be like, hey, maybe we should try this out. I see a wave coming. So I think curiosity is an incredible superpower for those that are truly genuine about it. And it's led me to many other places as well. And then I think you get it a little bit beaten out of you over the course of time. 15 years ago, failures, I would go cry and scream into a pillow, literally speaking. But nowadays, failure is just like, that's just another Tuesday, or what society would call failure. To me, I'm like,
right.
Yeah, that's just part of the game. Those two really come to mind, and just never stopping, just keeping going, standing back up.
Yeah. So one short question, and then I want to get to the failure topic. For the uninitiated, what is GEO?
Generative engine optimization, and then there's AEO. None of us have decided on the right term to call it. So essentially how AI is recommending brands these days. So there's a big shift happening from everyone used to search Google, and now we're searching ChatGPT and Claude and Grok and whatever your preferred tool is. So exact same thing, but for those AI platforms.
Okay. I think we'll get back to that, but I do want to spend some time on the topic of failure. I'm glad you brought it up. I don't think it's possible for any entrepreneur to go through an interview without having that be in the top few. A couple questions. You talked about how society defines failure, which I think society defines failure largely as I object to try to get something done. I put energy into it. And if that thing doesn't happen, then I failed. And you talked about having a different definition of failure. I'm interested, how do you define failure, and how do you define what society would call failure?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on society calls failure. I think anytime you're embarrassed, you failed in society's mind. It's almost like an emotional thing. For me, the definition of failure has totally evaporated. There is almost no such thing these days as actually, let me retract that. Failure is if I don't learn. Yes. That is what failure looks like. So if something happens to me, something goes sideways and I'm not willing to learn from it, or I don't learn from it, then I failed. That's literally failure. Because to me, life is learning. It's funny. People are so failure adverse, and it's just so odd because that is literally the point of life, learning and trying, and maybe society would call it failing. But to me, there almost is no such thing unless you're not willing to learn from it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So many large organizations are built around the prediction of the future. They tell the shareholder where we're going to be next quarter and in a year and in 2 years. And from a top down, we have to define what things have to get done by that next quarter. And at a department level, what are we going to get done? And then down to the individual level, and we're going to tie your compensation and your rating and your raise to your ability to sit in a room. And 15 months before the event, you're going to tell us in a smart way, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-based, you're going to tell us exactly what the future is. And we're going to measure it in a way that you either meet expectations or you don't meet expectations. And so all of this language puts around a negativity of taking risk, because the psychological result that happens is I'm going to take and sandbag that goal all the way. And what you find in large organizations is 6 sandbag walls in a row, you end up nowhere close to opportunity. You end up protected from the risk associated with opportunity. At least for me, in my observation, it almost has to be taught out, because even in the education system, the single answer is in the back of the book. Your ability to get to the single answer in the back of the book determines a success or a failure. There's a binary aspect to a given question. I think what you're highlighting is to say that the pursuit of information, even if there's stumbling along the way, it's stumbling forward in knowledge that prepares me for future environments. I think it's actually very difficult for some employees in large structured organizations to embrace what you're calling learning, because in their domain, it is literally considered failure. And a small step properly predicted has a greater reward than a giant leap that actually results in a small step, is what I've seen. What happens is you just don't think outside of the box, because there's really only punishment in your ecosystem if you miss the step. My experience in my leadership is that to have an organization that takes risks, to have an organization that tries for the big goal with the freedom to land short of the big goal, you have to teach that. You have to reinforce that, because emotionally, that's not how people are graduating from high school and college. In general, they are specific, measurable action, to make these SMART goals, and you just shrink what you're aiming for so that you know you can hit it. At least has been my observation.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. And I think that we've gotten there in society because we are no longer allowing people to be wrong, to say they were wrong. We're pointing them out on the news. We're making fun of them. Oh, they changed their mind. That's the whole point of life, is to change your mind. I always tell people, if I am the same person 70 years from now that I am today, that is the saddest outcome I could possibly think for my entire life. I'm going to attribute it to Mark Andreessen. I think strong beliefs loosely held. Yeah, sure. Have an opinion. And by all means, I've never run a public company, nor have I worked for them. I do understand that there are certain regulations as far as what they can say, what they can report and whatnot. So I'm not oblivious to that. But strong beliefs loosely held, we should be celebrating when people change their minds, when they learn, and when they say, wow, I was wrong and you were right. But we've gotten to a place where that's not even possible. And honestly, that's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah. Another characteristic that I've observed in serial entrepreneurs, and I think just in the time we've spent together, I think I can smell it in you too, is a consummate optimism. An optimism of the future with the right effort and with the right relationships and with the right energy. Tomorrow is better than today. Would you describe yourself that way?
Yeah, for sure. I always say that I don't associate with pessimists. So let me toss the idea out there. I may be 100% wrong about everything I say on this podcast, but
Sure.
I'm going to be optimistic because both optimism and pessimism are self-fulfilling prophecies. So if that is true, which one would you rather be? Would you rather be self-fulfilling as a pessimist or self-fulfilling as an optimist? I'll let time tell if I'm wrong or right, but boy, there's no other way to live than to be optimistic, because I truly believe that is self-fulfilling and also just way less stressful. Like, would you like to live every single day of your life just looking for the tiger in the weeds? And obviously, at some point, we'll get into some of my freakouts like I just had on vacation. I see plenty of tigers in the Serengeti, but I try to be optimistic about it.
So I'm interested. This is an interesting path to take. Is it possible, have you seen in your own life, I think I've seen in other serial entrepreneurs, they actually can become so optimistic. I think pessimists would call themselves realists. We can call them whatever they want, right? But they kind of bum them out. As a CEO, it's like, I got so many headwinds. I don't want a negative Nancy around me. But that can often lead to missing an actual tiger in the weeds. In a startup sense that you're in, do you observe, hey, just running as fast as you can, and you might get hit by a tiger, it might kill you, but you can respawn, you can start over, versus having maybe somebody that's a little more pessimistic in your ecosystem, not that they have their hands on the wheel, but that they're part of the ecosystem, and maybe they would use the word, I'm not going to use it in your sense, but like ground you or balance you. Do you find that there's a need for that? Or, really any pessimism, anybody that's not on board with the mission, they're just a drain on the energy, so they shouldn't be in the ecosystem?
Yeah. What did you call it? Not pessimism, but...
Realism?
Yeah, realism. How should I put this? I would say that anybody that calls themselves a realist that is also successful is an optimist. Pessimists are just pessimists. I don't care what they call themselves, but they are just pessimists. Let me put a persona on what I think is the perfect match. I would say the frugal optimist. So like all of the business leaders I really love, they know the unit economics of their business. They're watching expenses. They know the mechanics of it all, but they are optimistic as hell at the same time. So like they're looking out for stuff, but they're not letting that rule them either. So I would say pessimists are pessimists, but the rationalists are actually optimists if they're successful.
Okay. That's helpful. I think there's probably a pessimist or two out there that might disagree with you, but we'll let them book an episode of Grody Unprofessional and explain themselves.
I'm willing to be wrong.
As you think about it, you said 5 to 9 startups that you've been a part of. What are some of the stories of the ones that have gone sideways? What are some of the hard lessons that you've learned across your career?
Yeah, for sure. So early on, me and a couple guys at a gym decided to rent some space and start our own gym. It was me and 2 other owners effectively. And yeah, we had a great following. We rented space. We had revenue. And I've always been kind of a sales and growth guy. I never really call myself that, but that's kind of what I fall into. I love seeing things go up and to the right. But that's not everyone's dream necessarily. So I was called to coffee one day, and 2 minutes later, I was forced out of my own company by my 2 partners with no notice whatsoever or no recourse whatsoever. And boy, that was absolutely hard. Friends as well, I'll add.
Right.
Absolutely heartbreaking. Just stomach falls out of you type of situation. One of my other ones, probably one of my more successful companies back in the day. It's interesting. Once you get into startups, you realize there's like a spectrum of success. Most businesses, they'll started within 5 years, 90% of them will fail. And then you get to like the $100,000 revenue mark, the $1 million revenue mark, 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion. And all along the way, when you're at $0, you're like, anything above $0 is just like knocking it out of the park. But then you realize there's these places of failure and things can go sideways at any moment. So
Yes.
me and a buddy out of that startup weekend started a SaaS company, and we had a great niche that we stumbled into, continuing medical education. We had our MVP. We built it for $300. Our first sale was an enterprise contract for $4,500. We were absolutely hooked. We just loved it. And we grew that company for about 5 years in a good niche. We had enterprise clients like Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, NYU, Stanford. We were used on 4 continents. All the trappings of success. We had good revenue. And then we had technical debt. We had everything duct taped together. It was just a horrible product, and we never solved that. Then we started infighting, and we had 4 partners, too many co-founders. Yeah, we sold it for scraps in year 6. I had been floating my life for the first couple of years, so I had 60 grand in credit card debt and no job. Just absolute, poor prospects after that. So that was one that I'm very thankful to have gone through. But boy, talk about screaming into the pillow type of situation.
Yeah. For someone like yourself, serial entrepreneur, how long is it before you're re-energized to go run the hill again? There's some people that would say once you get knocked off the hill a couple times, they're going to really start to wrestle internally with, should I be running the hill? Should I be doing this? Is that something you're tempted towards, or really are you just wired like, I'm built to run this hill. I'm built to build businesses, and that's what I do. And I got knocked off the horse. We're getting right back on. I've mixed 5 analogies in one question. Pick whichever one works best for you and take a ride.
Looking back on it, it probably felt like some long breaks, but maybe like a month-long break or something like that. One of my mentors described me as one of those types of sharks that has to keep swimming or it dies, one of those types of animals, which honestly, that's something I've kind of struggled with, because for those of us that are wired that way, you can get tired. You have to rest.
Yeah.
You have this self-imposed treadmill, which is absolutely the best and the worst thing all wrapped into one. And you just can never stop because that's who you are. And it's the best thing ever and also the worst thing ever. So yeah, there weren't very many long breaks, but boy, that's a whole nother can of worms and problems you have to solve for, or you just won't make it long term.
Yeah. You mentioned 2 companies in which the end was handed to you or the end came upon you. One question that I've always fascinated to understand, for you, what goes into the calculus of quit versus grit? On an idea or on a concept, what is the calculus that's going into, man, just one more meeting, one more month, we're right on the cusp? Because I think that optimism, the temptation is to feel that it's always that one more step, that one more call, that one more meeting, and we're going to hit it. We're right on the vein. One more shovel load is going to get us there. But then there's other times where, is it truly that the shovel has to be ripped from your hand before you stop shoveling? Or has there been times where you say, you know what? My time or my energy or my creativity, this hole, it could still be dug. I'm not unoptimistic, but I just want to go dig somewhere else. What does that look like for you in your career? Someone that has so many ideas, but only finite time and energy.
Early on, it was a lot different. Everything had to be a yes early on and probably pushed way longer than I needed to. These days, how I look at it are 2 different things. Yet again, the economic optimist. So is it making money or is it profitable? I don't believe in, yeah, I love the startup ecosphere, and I certainly drank a lot of the VC Kool-Aid back in the day, but I despise the fact that so many businesses are started and grown without unit economics these days.
Sure.
They're like lost leaders for 20 years, or like winner take all. How about you just grow a business that makes money? Call me old fashioned, but I think that you should be profitable on day one. That's businesses that I start and grow these days, or the 200 ideas that I pursue a year. They need to be profitable in month 1 to really pursue. And then it's also, I'm a emotional thinker, less than a rational one. So my wife always kills me at chess, and that's why I don't play it anymore. She's logical. So a lot of it comes down to gut feeling. If I look at the economics and they don't make sense and I'm not feeling anymore, these days I just pull the plug,
Yeah. I'm going to piece together a couple of the questions into one comment. You tell me if it's right or wrong. Early on, it's easy for an entrepreneur to find their self-worth in the completion of a given idea. You lash your success, your worth to this idea that's my one, the pearl, as you said. As you've moved farther into entrepreneurship, you've tied 1,000 ideas and you've been a part of 9 companies. What would you say you lash your worth to or your success to if it's not a given one idea? Is it the exercise of entrepreneurship, the birthing of ideas into the real world? What is it that you look and say, man, we failed at 199 things this year, but this was a great year of success? How do you think about that in a way that is self-motivating?
Yeah, it's not any one thing these days. So if you'll go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see playing long-term games with long-term people. That's my only career goal. It's not to sell a company, not to get rich or anything like that. So I never set an alarm. And I usually get up about 5 a.m. in the morning. And that's because my feet hit the floor a second after my eyes open because I'm so excited to get after it. That's the feeling. That's the goal, that feeling every morning. The Charlie Munger question, what's the inverse of that? The opposite of that would be the anti-goal. You know, if I'm dreading getting up in the morning, if I have to start setting an alarm because I hate what I'm doing so much, things like that. Yeah, it's nothing in particular these days. It's really just that pursuit of daily fulfillment. I'm a big believer these days in multiple legs of the table. So if you're tying all of your self-worth and your fulfillment to a company, man, that's a binary outcome. The odds are against you, and they're against me as well, I might add. Shoot, my company might go bankrupt tomorrow. I have no idea what the day brings, but I'm sure as hell going to try hard. Companies can go sideways, but multiple legs of the table. So having a good home life, athletic pursuits, passion projects, business, if any one of those has a bad day, if any one of those has a bad year, the table is still standing at the end of the day. So I'm a big believer in that. I'm no Warren Buffett, no big success. I'd rather have a little bit of diversification to make sure I have a happy life.
Yeah, that's good. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about marketing, where your company's focused right now. And you talked about the evolution of marketing. The world is full of billions of ideas, millions of products. At one layer, it feels like there's infinite opportunity to get your message out there. But in reality, it's a million voices all screaming at the same time in all directions. And I talked to a business owner early in their life. They have a very simple view of, hey, if I just make some Facebook posts, that's marketing. That's like the 0th level view of like, hey, if I just tell people that I exist through Facebook, surely the gold rush to my front door is going to occur. And you've said you focus on small businesses. Talk to me about the customer experiences that you start with and what that education process looks like of really educating a small business about how to think about marketing, how to use marketing. What are the goals around marketing for a small business?
First and foremost, it's asking the question of where does your tribe hang out? Where are your customers? There are businesses out there that have no business having any online presence whatsoever, and that is totally fine. People are very insecure about these days. They're like, should I be on TikTok? I'm like, you're marketing to 80-year-olds. Of course you shouldn't be on TikTok. Well, you're crazy, you know? I really think it's an honest discussion about where your tribe is at. If you only sell at farmers markets, then maybe just focus on getting the best spot at the farmers market, right on the corner when people walk in. That is your marketing channel. Yeah, if your demographic is younger people that are on some social media platforms that I don't even know the name of probably because they just showed up a week ago, then yeah, go be on there. So it's first and foremost talking about where the tribe is at and then ruling out every possible other one and don't even pursue those. There are so many marketing channels. This year I'm focusing on 2 new marketing channels, and that is even a stretch for me. Once you've decided on the winners, you want to really dominate them and don't focus on anything else. Do 1 or 2 things really well, and then just don't focus on anything else, either because your customers aren't there or just because you can only focus on so many things at a time.
Are most of your customers, when they start interacting with you, their marketing strategy that they have today is essentially word of mouth, and they're trying to move beyond word of mouth? Or what's the sweet spot of customer interactions that you find yourself with?
think a lot of them have gotten by just with referrals to date. I mean, same with my own business. As any small business starts, you have your own network and you may do some cold outreach to start, but they don't really have any real channels. So referrals are within their own network and they just kind of need to scale up from there. So that's usually the sweet spot in which we operate.
I'm sure whenever you meet with a brand new potential customer, their first question to you is, how do I know if it's working? How do I know if the dollars I'm going to spend on marketing are of any value to me? How do you think about that, and how do you explain that to somebody who is hoping to improve their business but isn't sure if marketing will help their business or not?
Yeah, I don't like vanity metrics. So being somebody that's never had a big pile of money that I can just kind of sit behind and throw it at stuff, it's always really come down to, does it increase revenue? I have no control over their profit margin. So at the end of the day, did it increase revenue is like the main thing. So whatever channel it is, don't hide behind the vanity metrics of open rates or number of views or things like that. Those are all good lead indicators and certainly can tell you the directionality of things. But man, did you ring the bell more often than not afterwards? That's the only thing that matters to me.
You mentioned that your focus is on Reddit and GEO. For a company, as they think about the evolution from Google into AI models and into ChatGPT, did they have to think about marketing differently, or are you, as the person that they're hiring, the one that's thinking about it differently and really deploying their content in a new and different way? For a business, do they have to think about their messaging and their content differently as the platform and the channel has changed?
Back to the metaphor. If your two channels are a poster board or a sandwich board at the front of a farmer's market or ads on TikTok, of course, you're going to think about that differently. So it'd be disingenuous to imagine that you wouldn't. So from Google to GEO, that's not that big of a change. That's probably about as close as a transition as possible, but you still do need to understand it. Even for some of the things that I'm hiring marketers for my own business, I am learning it first, even from a high level, just so I can even hire the right person. Like trying to hire a plumber. It's like I've hired so many bad plumbers just because I have no idea if they're actually doing things to code and whatnot. But trying to learn a little bit of it first, just so you can discern good from bad. From there, marketing channels are different. They should be treated as such.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you come across customers that have sales pitch exhaustion? They've been pitched so many different ways of how they could use marketing. I have a friend of mine, he jokes that when he hired someone to use Facebook ads for his business, and he said, yep, I went to Facebook ads and my customer acquisition cost went to infinity. I spent money and I received 0 customers as a direct result of it. For him, he now has a bad taste about someone that's going to approach his business and say, hey, the World Wide Web, I'm joking, the World Wide Web and social media, and how do you talk through either someone that has a bad taste from a previous experience or someone that knows they need to be involved in getting their message out, but is really suspicious about any person that does that for a living because of how ethereal and kind of floaty and not tangible it all feels?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I actually really pride myself on. In the consulting game, in marketing, essentially humans are the product. It's a service. So being a good human is first and foremost. I always call us the Zappos of marketing, minus the double billion-dollar valuation. But we really try to be good, honest people first and foremost, go above and beyond, and do marketing second. And that honestly shocks some people. And if it shocks them, and if they don't like that, they're probably not a good fit for us. When I first talk to people, I tell them what our peers are going to tell them. I tell them how we're different. I use the Charlie Munger. I inverse what we do versus other people do. And I try to disqualify them, honestly. On sales calls, I try my best to say no to people that I talk to. And more and more these days before the call, just because we're getting busier and busier. But really, we don't sell to everyone. We're trying to disqualify as many people as possible. And honestly, I send a lot of people to our competitors too. I did that twice today. And boy, nothing builds trust like that. I'll tell you that much.
Right.
And then just being a great person afterwards and really showing that we try to treat people well. As an example, We have historically been like a top 1% cold emailer on the planet. Sorry for anybody that's gotten our messages in their inbox over the past decade, but
You weren't supposed to say that. You got to bring them back. Now you're the enemy. Come on back.
Mark them as not spam, please.
That's right.
But a couple times a year, historically, in cold email, the ESPs, the email service providers, change their rules. So Google and Microsoft being the biggest two. And it sends the whole industry into a tailspin. Everything gets marked as spam for about a 2-day period. And then we learn the new rules and we go about our business and the world keeps spinning. In our contracts, I say that all of that is out of our control. But I'll tell you what, in the past year or so when that has happened, I have dialed our billing down by 50% for every single one of our clients without them asking and just told them afterwards. And that's the right thing to do. And that's why I do it. And boy, yeah, yet again, nothing builds trust better than that. And we've actually had clients where their campaigns have failed, where they still send us customers and referrals because we are such a pleasure to work with. And man, if that's like all that we do in business, if that's like the outcome, that makes me proud.
That makes sense. I want to pivot a little bit back to the personal side. Recently, you took a vacation. I forget, was it Europe? Is that where you went?
Yeah, we went to the Alps. We did part of Tour Mont Blanc and then putzed around Switzerland for a little bit.
Right. It looked like an awesome trip. You mentioned on LinkedIn that it was a stressful trip in a unique way for you. You shared that you almost had a nervous breakdown. You were stressed and had anxiety. I'm interested. Just share the story, and I'd love to have you talk about what you think elements are that fed into that. And the reason I bring it up is because I do think that, call it work-life balance. I think a lot of people that are listening, there's stress in life, and stress can come from any source. It can come from your health. It can come from your family. It can come from profession. The reason I want to talk about it is just because you were very transparent and candid on LinkedIn about stuff you're wrestling with. And so if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to have you share the story, and then we can talk through experiences I've had and experiences you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking. We rolled into Zurich. I got to the hotel. I got on the Wi-Fi and I got a prompt attack on my phone, meaning somebody was trying to log in and I either had to say, is this me or is this not? One wrong press of the button would have given them access to a lot of things. I was able to handle the situation and we got it all resolved and whatnot, but boy, that just sent me into a tailspin. When I'm on vacation, I'm totally offline to work. I literally am unreachable. My team knows I'm unreachable. Don't even try to reach me. I don't check work email. It bums me out to hear that some people say they're on vacation when they're actually not. I am actually on vacation. So now I'm just like, oh man, is it happening to my work account right now? So in my head, within a 5-minute period, I'm like, man, a day from now, the corporate treasury is drained, our 401ks, they take over our homes, and we're homeless in 2 weeks. It's just totally spiraled out of control. And not to say that isn't possible. Who knows? Maybe if I was more famous and worth going after, maybe it could have happened. But highly improbable. I was able to handle the situation from a technical perspective, but boy, it just sent me into an absolute tailspin. And it's the first time it's happened on a vacation. It was absolutely mind-blowing. And it really came up every 2 days. I would get it mentally under control, and then I'd be on a train and just having to do breathing exercises to get it under control and kind of freaking out a little bit. And yeah, it was a bummer. It kind of bummed me out a bit, My wife, God bless her, handled it well. She's far more stoic than I am. I'm more of an emotional gut feeling guy. But yeah, it was crazy. And I think some of the lessons learned for those of us that are sharks that have to keep swimming or we die, or that are regimented, I'm training for a 50-mile ultra race right now. And every single minute of the day, there's no such thing as downtime. Even rest, I consider active. It's intentional. Every single second of my day is intentional. Reading 2 hours before bed. For those of us, when you go into a vacuum, it gets really weird. You go on vacation. I think that was the biggest lesson for me is I should have kept some routine. And next time I got to make sure the hotel has a gym. If that costs me more money, that's okay. I got to be doing my reading at night, at least a little bit. Just those stabilizing functions that really make me happy and grounded and also fill some of this void that happens on vacation. Even though we were doing an active vacation, I think that is the big takeaway for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's a lot of causes that can happen. I actually had a friend of mine. He was a CEO of a company. He was very highly involved in the details, both the technical expert of the company as well as the leader of the company. He went on vacation and broke out in hives, like had a massive hive breakout. And the diagnosis was adrenaline addiction. It was his body detoxing from not being full of adrenaline that he had essentially lived on and become addicted to across his business. And for him too, it was a little bit of a, whoa, I did not see that coming, right? I mean, he's a similar guy. He's got to be swimming, he's got to be moving, he's got to be going. But as he's gotten older, I think it's Shaquille O'Neal, 40 ain't 30, bro, right? As you get older, the capacity for stress and the capacity for output, even in the best of shape and even with the best of supplements, there is physical care that has to take place. And then there's another group too, and I would fall into this category. The work actually trades out the amount of energy and effort and time that you put into your diet, that you put into exercise. And that's a double hit, right? Because you're not fueling yourself, but then you're also not preparing yourself for the output on the backside of it. I had a similar situation, and that's why I connected so well with your post on LinkedIn. I was on vacation a number of years ago, and at least I don't remember a single event like a DDoS attack or something happening on my email. But for me, I think very similarly, it was the quietness of the vacuum, both mentally, emotionally. I started to check down the list of, like, if I think about my health, I'm not doing what I wanted to do. If I think about my being a parent, my kids are this age and this age. And man, as I sit here in the vacuum, I really wish I was involved in this part of their life. I really wish I was involved in that part of the life. I think about my marriage. As I was younger, I aspired that in my marriage, we would be this kind of couple and we would do these things together and we would do this. And then I think about my inbox and it's like, okay, I got 200 unanswered emails when I show up and the 100 emails that weren't answered before I got there. And we've got this project that's in gridlock. At least for me, I started to really like failing, going down the list. And it's like every day I wake up and as soon as my foot hits the ground, I'm going and I'm going and I'm going and I'm going. And then I hit the wall on the backside. I crash into the bed. I've ran all day long and I'm farther behind in all of these different domains. And I do that for 6 months. And here I am on vacation and the weight of my own inadequacy is like piling onto my shoulders. For me, it was too much too. I was in the Keys, Florida Keys, and I call my friend who I work with and I'm like, I can't do it. I can't keep living in this direction. I can't keep pushing this way because every day I'm farther behind and I feel like a bigger failure. Here's for me the conviction. Here's for me the passion. I think what happens over time, we start our career, we're an individual contributor, it's a small company, we're a hard worker, we've got energy, we get put on projects that are pretty simple, they're tactical projects, go do this and go do that, and it's been done before, and you can do it with gusto, and you can do it with intelligence, and you can do it with speed, and you get married and you still have free time and you can go on date nights and you can do this and you can do this, and then you have a kid and they just kind of eat, sleep, and poop for a while. So as long as you're there to help with one of those three, it's fine, but you can still go work on the house and you can do this and you can do this. And what's happening underneath it all over the course of a decade, every one of those domains is becoming a little bit more complex and taking a little bit more time and a little bit harder to hit a measurable finish line. So by the time you become an executive of a billion-dollar company, there are no easy tasks that make it to your inbox. The only thing that makes it to your inbox is we have an IT department that's at war with the HR department, or we have a lawsuit that's incoming from this competitor. None of this can just be like that intern project that was like, hey, look at the video I made. I'm done. I'm successful. Hip, hip, hooray. And parenting teenagers, far more complex than parenting eat, sleep, and poop. As you think about life, what happens is so often every little domain gets just a little more complex and a little bit harder. all the while, truly, your capacity for energy, your capacity for emotion, it's not growing at the rate that the things underneath it are growing. This is what I've seen, at least where I got to. I had to put the clutch in somewhere. There was only so much power that is available, and it was being distributed far too thin, and I had to put the clutch in somewhere. And I've seen the temptation of some people is to put the clutch in the places that are the least measurable and offer the least gratifying immediate results. And that usually is relationships. And that usually is health. Okay, I miss a workout, or I miss a date night, or I miss a golf outing with my friends. It's not that measurable. I miss a soccer game for my daughter in high school. It's not that measurable. But if I don't send this email by 2:00 in the morning, the CEO this and this and this. And so what happens is, passively speaking, a person puts the clutch in on really the things that are stabilizing in many ways, the things that are the long-term things, but they're not measurable to the next quarter. And they leave the transmission locked in on their career. What I've seen is, I've looked downfield in mentors of mine, if you're not careful, that with the clutches in and you don't put any energy to it, decays and it falls away. And I've had friends that have retired, multimillionaires, no billionaires, but multimillionaires, and their kids don't want to hang out with them. Why? Because you didn't hang out with me when I was in high school, and you weren't interested when I was in college. Very few of them that are that candid and actually pass back a generation and say, hey, don't do it the way that I did it. Some of that is just having to observe what's downfield. I'm not telling you, Danny, exactly what's for you. But for me, what I had to realize is that, one, my worth is not in the title. It's not in the pay. It's not in getting 100 emails out. It's not in what people think of me as an executive. My long-term worth, for me, the long-term worth is far more in my bloodline than in my bank account. For me, my worth personally is in my faith and in obeying the calling that I have received. That is where my worth is found. That has to trickle out into, so what does that mean? Honestly, there are life hacks. There are things that can get you an extra 10%, an extra 15%. What time of the day do you work out? Do you get prepared meals shipped to you? Do you pay someone to mow your yard? Do you drop off your laundry? All of that automation should be considered. But there came a point for me where there was no more automation. It truly was, the clutch has to go in somewhere. And that's where I think you have highlighted it. For somebody your age, it's awesome. And I would even pass it down to the next generation. Don't get too tangled up in your worth being the thing that is the most measurable, because it tempts you to put the clutch in on the things that aren't measurable but are very, very important. For those that know me personally, they know that ultimately I decided to take a sabbatical. Like, I took a career halftime with the single goal of rebooting, rewiring things around, you know what? I'm going to measure success by playing catch with my son. I'm going to measure success by taking my kids to school in the morning. I'm going to measure success by spending time in the Word. I'm going to measure success in these ways that they're not smart. Like, there's not a smart goal. You can wrap around some of these things, but for me personally, they're much more the legacy of it. I share that with you, Danny. I share that with the listener of the podcast. And the reason I do is because I was exactly where you were 5 years ago, where it's like, I'm at the top of the world. I'm killing it. I actually love my job, and I'm here on vacation, and I'm wigging out. And I'm wigging out because everything has crept in and everything's gotten just a little bit bigger silently at the same time. And my capacity has gotten not bigger in the same rate. It might actually have gotten a little bit smaller. And the result is pressure, right? As you add into a smaller environment, you get pressure. And as I've looked at other people, I've tried to learn from their experiences. And I'm not running the course clean, but one thing I'm committed to, both through this podcast and through conversations like this, is to share the pitfalls and share the tripwires that I've hit, so that those that come behind can see and hopefully avoid a few of them.
I love that advice. And God, a lot of points there. I mean, getting a vacation almost ruined by access to email, right? Just like, boy, if that doesn't put it in perspective, I'm not sure what does. But my wife and I were talking, it's complexity is like, it's just such this crazy thing. Success and money and wealth is all just a fancy word for complexity at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we want that. My ego wants that. I'm no saint. We were talking about on vacation about back when we first met, my wife and I, 13 or 14 years ago. And we're very happy now. But you know how happy you are when you're young and broke and you just have each other. You don't have a home, you're just renting. How can you have both? Entropy is such a weird thing in the universe, which is effectively complexity. And how can you have both? How can you have a little security, a little bit more, but not let it get out of control, not just keep it growing for the ego's sake? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I would say at some level, I'm going to take your logic structure around how do you define failure, and I'm going to lift and shift that logic structure in how do you define security, or how do you define success. There's a way that the broader society defines security, and that's in a bank account, or that's working for a blue chip company, or that's having a boss that appreciates me and says they appreciate it, and the measurable is that I get a raise, or that I have this number. There's this old commercial, and I don't remember which financial institution it was, but the commercial was out on a park bench. You're sitting on a park bench and there's people walking by, and they all have this number floating above them, and it was kind of the tagline was, what's your number? So one person has 7.5 million, one person has 1.3 million. What's the number that you need to be comfortable? Or I forget, it's an old commercial that I just really remember the visual of, not the actual message. I think that's a slippery slope. The same way that failure has to be reframed, security and what your worth is wrapped into has to be reframed. The world and society would absolutely say power and visibility and name recognition and spending capacity and all this. Those things are so fleeting. They're falling away. You can even take an example like founders that were wildly successful in their first venture, and then you never hear from them again. You and I could look and be like, you got $500 million. How could you have any stress left in your life? But their life is a dumpster fire because they spend it trying to hit another high watermark. And the reality is if we are only measuring success and security off of a recent peak event or a recent high watermark, there's a lot of years where you wake up failing. And measuring failure as did I do something versus, I think what you said is the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of moving forward. For me, it has absolutely been, it's a biblical reference. There's this reference in the Old Testament where Saul is the king of Israel and David is the future king of Israel. And the people are praising the future king of Israel, David, because he's so much better at fighting wars than Saul. The people are singing Saul and his thousands, David and his 10,000s. And they're basically celebrating David and how great he is, the future king of Israel, at killing Philistines or whatever, Moabites or mosquito bites. I don't know who he was killing at the time. Here's the point. Both careers at some level are destroyed by that song. Saul, the present king, goes mad, goes jealous because other people prefer David over him. He spends the rest of his life trying to kill David. David becomes the king, but there's almost an arrogance. There's almost a pride. There's almost an entitlement that is built in because I'm the guy with the 10,000s. I'm David. I'm the guy that, it's to say, if you're not careful, pride or arrogance are going to take you out. And as you measure what does success look like, understanding you can fall off the road in both directions. Just like you said, redefining what failure looks like. For me, it has had to be redefining what success looks like. I was the executive of a $500 million organization with 500 people, fastest growth in the industry, on and on and on and on. And if I would have kept holding on to that chain, if I would have kept holding on to that rope, it would have cost me things that are far more valuable than anything associated with that job. And so the right thing for me was to let go. And I truly, when I took a sabbatical, I did not know what the next job would be. I did not know if that would be selling golf clubs at Dick's Sporting Goods. I didn't know what that would look like, but I knew that which was I couldn't sacrifice, I wasn't going to put it on the altar for something that I was more than willing to sacrifice. That's not, to me, I'm not trying to celebrate myself, but what I am trying to do is share my story, because I think there are a ton of people that are very successful through the world's eyes, but under the curtain, it is so stressful. And things are being torn apart, but they're handcuffed either to the W-2 or the perception of the title. And you said it from an entrepreneurial perspective, things are going to change. That's not just an entrepreneurial perspective. There are people working in Fortune 50 companies right now that are one CEO change from a massive reorg, or one tariff change from a massive reorg. Stability used to be in the blue chips. There is not stability in the blue chip. And so the same way that you saying, hey, I'm an entrepreneur and I got to be prepared for things to change, I would tell you in the modern world, that is an answer for everybody professionally. The more you wrap your hands around the current state of your career and the current state of your title, the more you're setting yourself up to get burned. And that doesn't matter if you're founder or if you're employee 150,000 and vice president at this, or this is my experience.
That's amazing. And that's definitely helping me reframe a lot of things. I'm going to have to even think about that for myself. One thing that helped me through on some dark moments was thinking about, like you said, security. What is security, and what is that can't be taken away? And three things come to mind, depending on one's propensity. The Stoics would say one's reasoned choice. That is their version of security. That can never be taken away. You can always have reasoned choice. For those that are not religious, mission can never be taken away. And for those that are religious, faith can never be taken away, no matter good times or bad. It's effectively all things that are bigger than your circumstance.
Right.
Easier said than done, but that's what I try to remind myself of. It's like how I react to things, or what gets me out of bed in the morning. Those, in good or bad, hopefully those can't be taken away.
That's right. What I have experienced in conversations I've had with a lot of guys that are coming out of their 30s and into their 40s, their own health gets more complex. Marriages get more complex. Parenting gets more complex. Their professional life has gotten a lot more complex. Depending on the age of their parents, being a son or daughter has become more complex as they enter a sandwich generation. And if you're trying to use what power you have and distribute it in all of those domains, it just gets split far too wide. And the ability to put the clutch into one of them and disengage it, it's a big deal. And there are some of those domains that you put the clutch in and you disengage it, you can't put it back. You miss the adolescence of a child for whatever reason. It's hard to put it back. It's hard to piece it back together. I don't have the answers. My goal here is not to prescribe a single answer to everybody, but it is to say, one, I sympathize with the stress, but not wrestling with it is not the right answer. This is one of those things where it's hard decisions that have to be made. And sometimes the opening of Pandora's box, it's worse before it gets better. And so a lot of people just think, hey, can I kick it? Can I kick it? I absolutely tried to kick it as far as I could. And I would say, there were some hacks that I was able to stretch it out farther, but it just kept getting to the point where it's like, you know what? I'm costing myself things that I'm not willing to spend for things that are fleeting, for things that one decision and they evaporate anyway. Danny, I really appreciate your candor. I appreciate you sharing what you shared on LinkedIn. I think that it's good for others to see that we're all bumping along here. We're all trying to figure it out in situ. And the more that we can share in the right format and with the right candor with one another, one, you find people wrestling with it the same, and you find people that have wrestled through it. Not that one answer is the answer for all, but helping to see how other people have thought through it and wrestled through it. At least for me, looking downfield at the people farther down and them calling back tripwires and potholes that they've hit. To me, it's one of the greatest definitions of mentorship.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Danny, it has been so good to spend some time chatting with you, talking through marketing, talking through entrepreneurship, and talking through wigging out on vacation. I wish you all the best. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Justin.
For those that wish to share praise, feedback, accolades, or large sums of money, you can reach out to justin@grody.io. For those with complaints, concerns, frustrations, or accusations, or if you're a successful pessimist and you feel that you were improperly characterized in this episode, you can reach Danny at his email. But I'll warn you, the man owns the top cold emailing company in the world. Just think about it. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.